want to say good evening. I am Jessica Thomas. You are at the MS Views and News Mental Wellness Chat, and this is a monthly chat. We changed the topic. Some of the information is the routine is a little bit the same, but we changed the topic and some of the information and resources. So tonight's topic is taming stress. We're going to move on to our next slide. And I want to thank MS Views and News for this program. We started this a couple of years ago, and without their support, we probably would have not been able to do this program. And then also want to thank our new sponsor, Vicharis, so much. We are thankful for the support for this program. MS Views and News and Vicharis, we're very thankful for all that you're doing. Thank you so much for supporting this program. So I just want to give us a pretense here to start us off, some key concepts. Stress is inevitable. So we are not going to be able to stop the stress from happening or stop any stress from happening. But so I want to talk, we'll talk a little bit today about how we can work around stress and what we can do with it. And then we're going to also talk about emotional wellness. It's a factor for it's a good quality of life. It's really important for MS for us to have as best and most resilient emotional wellness as possible, and how can we foster and improve it. So we're going to focus on these things today. So I had stress and chronic disease because earlier today I was doing a different presentation on related to a chronic disease, and I just pulled the slide because I think it's a very good example. So it explains kind of what I want to say. So, but this is true with MS. So when you think about stress and MS, it's a toxic relationship. Stress is bad for everybody. Stress is inevitable. It's going to be around us. There's different types of stress. But stress and MS usually don't go hand in hand. It ends up being kind of a toxic relationship. And with MS, it's important for us to manage our stress. And the ironic thing is that MS can cause a good bit of stress too, and increased stress. So what we're going to be talking about is, it's important to understand these factors and what can we do. So while we see that stress and will impact our emotional wellness and sometimes even impact our MS symptoms, it kind of all holds hands. So if we do strategies or have strategies to help reduce the stress or reduce or increase our emotional wellness, then it's going to hold hands with helping to manage stress, etc. So it's kind of messy at first, but once you get into it, you see that it all interconnects. We'll move on to our next slide. So we're going to go to our question box. Again, I'm going to ask you what types of things make you feel stressed. I will get us started. I usually get us started, so it gives you time to type. Let's see, what things are making me feel stressed? Work has been very busy. We have a lot of really great things going on, but that's led to a little bit of stress. It's positive stress sometimes, and it's negative stress sometimes. There's just a lot of pieces in the air and a lot of things I can't control. Very much like MS, and when you can't control things, it's hard. So we have Deborah here that mentions that heat is making her feel stressed. When we get hot in the Carolinas, I feel stressed too. And Sarah said the death of a family, friends, and family. I am sorry to hear that, Sarah, and that absolutely can create a lot of stress and feelings of loss and grief, etc. Deborah says family relationships. Maddie said, honestly, I'm not stressed. It's amazing. Well, if you are not feeling stressed, Maddie, I want you to hold on to that. That's a really great feeling. We'll see if anyone else, so any other types of things right now that are making you feel stressed. Let's see. Sarah says work. Bruce says inflation cost of things, but not an increase to Social Security. Tell me about it. Every time I go to the grocery store, I think about people and how how people are able right now to afford such great, price increases in food, etc. Helen said just sometimes life Kinesis, time pressure, especially since my partner thrives on time pressure, so being on time, etc. Maureen said MS symptoms and her spouse at times. Rhonda said wanting to do more than I have time. Carol said financial, marital, alone on my MS journey. Michael says going somewhere when I don't know the venue. That can be very, very frustrating, especially if you need accommodations or need to plan around that. Linda says preparing for oral surgery. Let me go down. Debbie said medical issues. David said walking challenges. Warren, Jane, you guys have my heart. Grown son moved home, a college graduate, no job, using my personal items in the kitchen, and I am so sorry. We have Lisa who says work stress, have been in healthcare for over 35 years, Lisa. And then again, Sarah says work. Sherry said being alone. And then Helen said all of these things. Okay, and then we have Line who said children who are young adults living with me and my husband. So that is something that can be very common, as you know, as having our older children, especially with the financial pieces in place as well, where things are harder and more expensive now. And I can tell you, as being a therapist, that is a very common thing in therapy, that I worked with people when they had children that were home. So let's move on to our next slide. So managing stress. Okay, I'm not going to be able to solve all these stressors, right? But I'm going to give you some tips and some strategies, and then we're going to talk about some things to help with self-care. And so for managing stress, here are a couple of tips. Avoiding unnecessary stress. So when you think about the things that that cause you stress, think about. Oh, and we have Jill here who said being late for an appointment can be stressful for her. So when we're thinking about things that that we're stressed about, are there things or aspects of it that can be avoided? So so sometimes it might be that extra communication can help with avoiding a stressful situation. It might be with if you're worried about time, etc., getting up a little bit earlier, going to bed a little bit earlier, being prepared. I want you to think about what your stressor is. Is there aspect, and I don't want you to put in the chat box or a question box for this, but are there aspects of it that you can avoid? And some of it, yes, and some of it, no. Alter. Is there anything about the situation that you can change just a little bit when you can, and would that help with managing the stress some? Or adapting to the situation. So here is the reality of it is what it is. Are you able to kind of adapt to it so that way you can be better adjusted? And I'll give you an example. Let's see, one of the most stressful things is when my family gets on a road trip. I can't explain it. I'm just like you. I'm human. I might be a therapist, but I am human. And I love my husband, but we're very different. And I love my son, but he drives me crazy sometimes too. And so when we get in the car to go on a road trip, I've realized that there's things that I can do to control myself. I can bring my headphones to listen to my own music if I want to. I can go early in the car and sit and wait, and that helps me to, instead of being frustrated about everybody hurrying up to get to the car, if I get in the car and I sit down, that just helps me feel calm and peaceful while they're doing what they're doing. And then adapting the situation. I've cognitively adapted that I know that we're going to probably leave right on time or a couple minutes late, because that's what we do as a family. And accepting the things that I can't change. And I know I can't change my husband's behavior. I can't change my son's. I can only change mine. And so that's a little stressor. We have Maria here that says that she uses, looks like the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to set things I cannot change, the courage to change the things that I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Very, very good. I wanted to also say real quick, if you don't want me to say your name, say that in the beginning of the comment so I get there first, because I usually will look at the name, then read the comment out. And so if you don't want me to say your name, just for me to say, don't say my name, and then have the comment, because that will at least let me catch it a little bit faster, because I do see that there's a comment, and then I'll look at the name, and it helps a little bit. So we're going to go on to our next slide. When do you know that your stress needs to be tamed? What are your stress signs? Tell me, what does stress look like for you? And we ask this a lot, but we do this on purpose because I want you to really know yourself well. And then I want you to see that other people are probably similar. And then I just want us to be able to connect. So we have such a sweet suggestion. There, for someone who said that they were lonely, we have a suggestion to tell the lady who said she was lonely to volunteer at a school at grade level she enjoys and she would like to do. So that is a beautiful suggestion. So Linda says that she internally feels when her stress needs to be tamed. Maddie says, madness in my mind. You can articulate that a little bit more if you want to, Maddie, but I understand what you're saying. Rhonda says, beginning to feel warm, so maybe kind of like feeling flustered maybe. Sarah says, inability to function, get things done that I need to get done. Carol says, not sleeping, can't focus, jaw clenching and irritated. Kenia says, when I start berating myself, saying, you know, you idiot, etc. Lauren says, or Jade says, when I get happy, unhappy, or cry. Sherry said, anxiety attacks. Deborah says, a feeling of being overwhelmed, trapped in an awkward position. So Maddie explained it a little bit more, that madness in my mind is anxiety, pain, and depression. Linda says, like it's a rush from 0 to 100. And this is an important thing. And then Helen says, oh my gosh, all things mentioned. That 0 to 100 sometimes can happen, and then sometimes it's subtle. We can have subtle little changes that we realize that we're kind of stressed, like small signs too. Sarah says, sometimes I feel like there's an electrical storm in my brain. And Michael says, stop. He starts coughing uncontrollably. So we all have signs that our stress is out of control. I know that one of my more severe signs would be significant anxiety. But one of my immediate signs, my small sign, is that I clench my teeth, or I start feeling very overwhelmed. And so what I would like for you to do, if you're, and Linda asked, can we catch it before it explodes? So one of the things that I want you to do between this mental wellness chat and the next mental wellness chat is to think about, what are your small, subtle signs? Because often we might feel like we go from 1 to 100, but but more often than that is we have small little things that are kind of telling us that we're feeling stressed. I know, like, if I don't sleep good the night before and I'm awake, that usually will trickle into more feelings of being that I'm under stress that needs to be tamed. Or we have Linda here who said, my stress at work was very toxic, a lot of changes where she works, and she had a hard time handling it and became depressed, had anxiety, insomnia, very overwhelmed. So when stress gets out of control, and we feel out of control with it, often it exacerbates to whatever that 100 is. And so we are going to also, so Linda said, you know, identifying the triggers. I guess you are right on the money there, Linda. When we can identify our small, know what the triggers are to the stress, and then also knowing what our small stress signs are, we can often catch before we get to that 100. And then Maddie said that since he's been practicing grounding, he's noticed that his stress has greatly subsided. So we are going to do this one a little bit quickly, but it's actually it's important. So I want as many people to respond to this one. How does stress affect your MS? And I will get us started. My stress affects my cognition probably first because it takes a lot of my focus away if I'm feeling very stressed. So we have Linda and Sarah that both said pseudo-flare. We had someone ask, what is grounding? And so grounding is a strategy that you can do, a coping tool, a really cool thing. You can literally, there's a couple different ways to do it. You literally can put your feet on the ground, and it kind of, there's something very organic and cool about it that kind of centers you to the earth. That type of grounding is really cool. But the type of grounding as a therapist that I've used is where you allow yourself to kind of become very present. And how you do that is you do it by practicing what are, using your senses. You know, what are things, what can I see? What can I smell? What can I hear? What can I taste? What can I touch, etc. And so I think when you're sitting outside, it's a perfect time to ground yourself, but you can really practice grounding at any point. I will make a point. I know for the people that ask this, they're on the mental wellness chat, and I will make sure that I bring a slide for that as well. Sherry says she can notices in her speech, and Julie says stress ? So maybe this stress may make her feel more stressed. I'm not sure. So we'll move on to our next slide. And Kenia says, I can handle fewer decisions. So executive function is kind of out of the window. Like, you know, it's hard to think very clearly. And so we have Yvette that says, what about if you're in a wheelchair and you can't put your feet on the ground? And that's a really great thing. What I would do is I would recommend touching something. So if you are close to a bush or a flower or a tree or something, it's the idea of being one with nature. And so I would recommend doing that. But then also, one of the ways I ground my own self, I have a screened-in porch that I work from a lot of times. And there's times that I need to practice grounding. What I will do is I will just kind of, I have flowers on my porch, but I will make sure that I just spend time looking at the flowers. And that for me is very grounding. So there's other strategies besides just putting your feet down. So Yvette, I'm so thankful that you asked about that. Pam said that her sleep is affected, and that makes the fatigue even worse. Deborah said, I'm afraid of losing control of my emotions. I notice my breathing gets shallow and starts feeling sick to her stomach. I'm going to do some breathing activities and exercises here today as well. So that should help a little bit, I would think. So for self-care and stress management, there's enduring versus temporary and reactive versus proactive. So when you're thinking about self-care, I want you to think enduring is kind of like let's say that you practice mindfulness or a breathing activity, or you do chair yoga. Those are more enduring activities because they give you a benefit far beyond just the benefit of just doing that. Or if you can do physical exercise in the sense of like walking or something like that, you create endorphins from that. And so there's enduring aspects of that versus temporary. Temporary is going like maybe meeting a friend for a cup of coffee or something. You feel better for the moment, and then that self-care doesn't have as long as effect, but you do have connection there. And so I don't want to discount that. There's also reactive versus proactive. And so reactive, are the tools that we use when we notice that, I have a couple of stress signs coming up. I told you guys that I've been very busy with work. We have a lot of great things going on, but recently I've started painting in the evenings because I've realized that as a reactive stressor, I need to paint. So I have paint on my porch, and I've been learning how to do flowers, etc. And I'm doing that that's almost a reactive measure for me, because if I'm noticing I'm stressed, then I go and I paint. But whereas a proactive may be a daily walk, or a proactive measure might be journaling, or practicing gratitude every day, etc. And so, so when you're thinking about managing your stress, taming your stress, I want you to think about coping mechanisms that are enduring and temporary, reactive and proactive, because they all have a place and they're very important. We had someone who says stress robs me of a lot of energy. Absolutely. Earlier today, I did a presentation on stress and fatigue and emotional wellness, and for a different disease state. But I talked a lot about how stress impacts fatigue, and so thank you for sharing that, because that's so very common. Maureen said, pulling random weeds helps me. That is actually probably a really grounding activity that would help you if you're able to do that, but it also is a very therapeutic thing to do as well. So we're going to move on to our next slide. So we're going to talk a little bit about taming. How do we tame stress through self-care? And we'll move on to the next slide. And we're going to talk about different types of self-care. So there's emotional self-care, physical self-care, and spiritual self-care. So emotional self-care is going to be things such as self-talk, how you talk to yourself. It might be taking weekly bubble baths, or saying no to things that cause unnecessary stress. It may be giving yourself permission to take a pause, or setting up a weekly coffee date with a friend. Physical self-care is when you're such as like prioritizing sleep. So when you say no to something so you can go to bed. I remember I said no recently to a baseball game. It was a basketball game. It was a big playoff game, and my family loves sports. And I said it can't be more important than my sleep. So physical self-care might be adopting an exercise routine. It's also choosing and sticking with healthy and nourishing foods. Spiritual care can be attending, a religious service. It could be spending time meditating or in nature, or incorporating regular acts of kindness into your day, or keeping a gratitude journal. So we're going to move on to some examples. Linda says, I love that she weeds her in her mint garden. And you know what? So Linda has a mint garden, she pulls the weeds out. And then you have like when you pull like the weeds out of the mint garden, it probably feels good, and you're taking care of something, and you can see a finish, like the weed is there and now the weed is gone. So there's a task about that. But then also you get the really good smell from the mint, which is therapeutic as well. And if you have rosemary, mint, or any herbs in your garden, that's, it can be very therapeutic to engage in that. And so the next strategy I'm going to tell you, and you may have heard this before in the mental wellness chat, maybe or maybe not, depending on how long you've been a part of the community here. But it is the acronym of STOP. And so for this acronym, what I want you to do is when you're, so this is going to be a tool that helps you from going from 0 to 100, because it's going to get us to stop and think about things. So you stop whatever it is that you're doing. So say that just everything is really busy, or say that you went outside and it was too hot, because we had some people that the heat has been stressful. Stop what you're doing, or maybe go back inside for a moment. But stop and take a few deep breaths. And when you breathe, I want you to do a post-lateral rib cage breath. And I want you to breathe in through your nose and then out through your mouth. And take a couple of breaths, 5 or 10 breaths, and really pay attention to how you're feeling. Do you notice how is your mood? How is your body feeling? How are you hungry? Are you tired? How's your cognition? I have to do this with cognition. I have to kind of stop and say, how's my brain working right now? Because I require naps sometimes. And identify what it is that you need, and then think about what is the next thing I can do to help right now. So if you're feeling stressed, it might be implementing a coping mechanism. It may be if you're feeling fatigued that you give yourself permission to take a rest. If you are feeling a little bit anxious, that you might give yourself a couple minutes to paint like I do. Or if you're feeling overwhelmed, it might be I need to make a list because I have all these things floating around. So if you ever, I encourage you to use this tool. It's called Stop. And I hope that if you use it, you give yourself permission to kind of walk through all the different steps because they're very therapeutic and can help you to kind of get on your way for your next thing. So I have a couple of comments here, so I'm going to read these first. Lisa said, massage and acupuncture helps me monthly for my self-care. That's great. And then Maddie said that's also contact with the earth, and he was talking about the mint and weeding. Deborah says, HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. That's actually a really good acronym. So, so if you're stopping, you can ask myself, is it HALT? Am I hungry? Am I angry? Am I lonely? Or am I tired? That's actually a really good one. And I like, Deborah, that you brought up lonely because sometimes I'm human, so I can only, the only person talking sometimes I'm here, but I find that sometimes I'm kind of in a bad mood because I'm a little bit lonely. I've been working from home. It's been, I've been by myself all day, and I need socialization. I need to talk or call somebody, and usually I'll call someone in chat. And then we have someone that says, my body says it will fatigue. Well, and then uses stop to prevent. When my body says it will fatigue, then I use stop to prevent and has a little bit of recovery. If I said that wrong, just feel free to continue to write. And we're going to move on to our next slide. So the next strategy is called box breathing. We have 2 breathing exercises, and these are important exercises. And I think that it's one of the best ways to tame stress is to really think about all the A's that I mentioned. If you can you change, or do you have to adapt, etc. But let's discover a little bit of breathing, because breathing exercises are one of the best ways that we can ground ourselves. It's another activity to do this, but it helps us to refocus. And if you're someone who cognitively can get challenged when you're under a lot of stress, this is actually a good activity too. I learned many years ago that this in the military was taught as combat breathing. And I like the term box breathing much better, but they used to teach this breathing per Brene Brown. I heard this on a podcast to soldiers when they were in battle. And the reason why is it helped with focus, it helped to stay calm, etc. And so, for box breathing, what you would do is you would inhale for a count of 4. So you inhale for 2, 3, 4. You hold your breath for 2, 3, 4. You exhale through your mouth for 2, 3, 4, and then you hold it for 2, 3, 4. So one of the great things about doing this activity is that when you're breathing this way, you have to focus and you have to think about where you are in the breathing pattern, and it allows you to be present. And then also breathing in and breathing out is really good for your body. Breathing in general, we know, but literally breathing exercises are really good, and this can help to kind of cope with stress, anxiety, or if you're really frustrated, and then it helps your body to get kind of back into a natural rhythm. Someone wanted me to go over what HALT means. So HALT is an acronym that Deborah shared with us. And HALT, I think, is just an example of 4 ways that we may feel reactive. So HALT, H being hungry, A being angry, L being lonely, and T being tired. So if you notice that you're, feeling overwhelmed, is it any part of HALT? Am I hungry? Am I angry? Do I feel lonely or disconnected from people, or am I tired? Sarah says, from Tai Chi, the healing sound for stress is shh. So your breath through your nose and then exhale, shush. So you breathe in through your nose and then you exhale, shush. I'm sorry I didn't make that a very good sound, but and then Yvette says, very good reminder. So we're going to move on to our next slide, and this is going to be another type of breathing exercise. This one tends to be one of my favorites because it will help to calm the vagus nerve, which ultimately will calm the autonomic body reaction. And so you kind of have some biofeedback from this one. So when you breathe in, I call it 1 to 2 breathing, but some people call it pursed lip breathing. When you breathe in, it is your inhale your exhale is twice as long as your inhale. So when you breathe in, you breathe in through your nose for a count of 2. So we'll start this. So we'll breathe in for 1, 2, and then we breathe out for 1, 2, 3, 4. So what we're going to do is we have enough time to do this. So we're going to do 3 series of this breathing exercise. I'm going to talk you through it, so I'm not going to be able to quite do it, but I'm going to lead you through it. So I want you to sit up as straight as you can. And I want you to take a deep breath in through your nose for a count of 1, 2. Exhale for 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale again for 1, 2. Exhale for 1, 2, 3, 4. Inhale one more time for 1, 2. And exhale for 1, 2, 3, 4. Very good. Just wanted to help reinforce the breathing. So we have someone that says, I've also used halt to mean how about a little time. So it has multiple meanings. And then David said, physical therapy, haircuts, and meditation help stress. Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. So let's move on to our next slide. Okay, so we're not really taking a quiz. But I want us to be inspired by these questions. This is essential self-care quiz. Again, we're not taking it as a quiz. I just want us to be inspired by it, thinking about your answers for yourself. So actually, these are statements. So I take time for myself every day, even if it's only 15 minutes. I drink adequate amount of water each day, and you don't put anything in the question box. These are just to get you kind of thinking about things that are good for self-care. I get more than 6 hours of sleep at night. I consume at least 5 servings of fruit and vegetables each day. I get together with friends at least once a month. I laugh daily. When I feel exhausted or unwell, I give myself a timeout and allow myself to do less. I get regular light exercise several times a week. I have a relaxing bedtime routine. I make an effort to disconnect sometimes and turn off my phone, my TV, and my computer. I talk honestly and openly to a loved one in the past month. In the past month, I've enjoyed one meal without any distractions. I spend time outdoors every week. I say no to myself and others when I need to. I make time to do the things that I love. I forgive myself for any mistakes I make, and I let go of past resentments towards others. And I focus on the positive about myself. So those are all really good samples or examples of self-care. And of course, if you did all those, that would be amazing. But the truth is that as I read that list, I hope that, 1 or 2 items kind of stuck out to you and helped you to kind of think about, that's something I probably would like to do more of. And if I mentioned something that you connected with that you think, gosh, I wish I was doing that, my challenge to you is going to be this one very thing. It is to, in very small ways, do something every day to get you closer to that. So just a small step. So for example, let me go back to the statements. I get more than 6 hours of sleep each night. If this is something that you have not been doing, then maybe that in the evenings you try to go to bed a little bit earlier. Or a small step would be talking to your doctor about it. Another one would be I consume at least 5 fruits of or servings of fruit and vegetables a day. So there may be, you know, if you're not consuming any fruits and vegetables, maybe just, you know, one, and then you build from that. Build from small steps, make big changes. I guess that is my point, essentially. And we have Lisa here who says, I get regular exercise routine and try to get together with friends once per month, which is amazing. Now let's move on to our next slide. So self-care requires checking in with yourself, asking yourself how you're doing and what your body's asking for. It's a little bit of that STOP acronym. That STOP acronym's more for those moments that you need it, but really taking care of yourself is checking in and listening and kind of thinking, what do I need? How am I feeling? We'll move on. So I'm not sure how many of you have seen this before, but I do incorporate it in the mental wellness chat, and I will continue to incorporate it because I think it is so very important. We must give ourselves permission to do things. And the reason why I am giving you a permission slip, and if you Googled permission slip, you'd actually find this graphic, to be honest. But I have noticed that when people write down and give themselves permission, they're to do something that they want to do or they need to do, sometimes it takes away some of the guilt, and it gives them the push that they need to do it. So I encourage you to use this permission slip and to give yourself permission, either, you know, for things to look different or to do that self-care activity, and allow yourself the opportunity to have permission to do what it is that you need to do to take care of yourself. So we're going to move on to the next slide. Okay, so this is a question. What do you do when you realize after you're stressed? So I told you that I painted a little bit. Like when you are noticing that you are stressed, what are you doing? What do you, and we can, now we'll leave this one and then we'll go to the next one. So when after you realize you're stressed, what do you do? So we have Deborah that says, go for a walk. I said I've been painting lately. Sometimes I'll just sit on my porch, and I would sit on my porch, I'll close my eyes and I'll just listen to the birds. Antoinette says, yes, going for a walk. Sherry says, petting my dog. So when you go for a walk, guess what happens? You create endorphins and increase dopamine, so you tend to feel a little bit better. Plus, if you're going outside and it's not blazing hot and you have like access to sunshine, you're getting actually some vitamin D, which is good for your mood as well. If you're petting your dog, what's happening is that you are, our dogs are our best friends. I have mine is sleeping here. I'm not going to say her name, but she's on the floor sleeping. She has interrupted the mental wellness chat before, so I'm not going to say her name, but you create oxytocin. So when you hold a baby or even watch really cute animal videos or baby videos, etc., or pet your dog, you are creating oxytocin, which is it's a happiness hormone. It's kind of like the love hormone, they say. Deep breathing, find something funny to watch. That is great, by Sarah. Helen says, I cook since it's my passion since I was very young. That is amazing. Rhonda says, always do deep breathing. Lisa says, go outside and take her dog for a walk. Kenia says, I watch YouTube stand-up comedy. Maureen says, I go outside and clear my head. David says, rest with no talking. Linda says, listen to music. These are really great things to do. I encourage us all to have things to do. Kind of think, you know, at hand, you know, when I'm feeling kind of stressed, you know, what are some things that I can do? Sarah says, I'm trying to stop stress eating. I can say I stress eat sometimes, and that's been a very frustrating thing for me since COVID, because I'm home and I'm around so much food. If anyone else has any stress eating, feel free to chime in if you want to connect. But Sarah, I'll connect with you and just say I can stress eat too sometimes. And one of the best things to change that is to find alternative activities to do besides eat. And let's move on to our next question box. How do you make time for self-care? So this is pretty important because self-care just doesn't happen by itself. I mean, sometimes it might, I guess. You know, I'm a good sleeper, so sleep works for me, you know, in terms of a sleep routine, etc. But self-care is kind of hard to just sort of happen. So Linda says she builds it into her daily routine. Are any of you struggling to make time for self-care? And if you are, some of the suggestions, I always say start small. Thinking about little things that you can do that help give you a break, give you a sense of reprieve. Sarah says that she has regular schedules. Sandy says yes. Deborah said join the YMCA to see a regular group. Lisa says try a list of 5 things. One of the things that I've done in terms of self-care that I think might connect with some of you is that since I work from home and I'm a little bit more remote these days and isolated, as I've joined a Rotary Club, and that has allowed me to have they have a social thing once a week, and then they have events that I can help with, like service projects, and that has been a good thing for me. I don't go to everything because of my work demands, but having that has given me actually some time for self-care in terms of connecting. Now, for some people, that would be the opposite of what you would want, because you might be busy enough and you don't need to do other things and you don't need another to do. But for me, that's been a balance. David says scheduling everything helps. Lisa says if I only do 3 out of 5 on the list, then I put 2 on the list for the next day. That is a great strategy. If you are ever feeling overwhelmed by the things that you have to do, I think a strategy that I like is called creating an I did list. And so instead of having a to-do list, which feels like it might be haunting you, I like the 5 though, because that's kind of a short number. But what you do is you switch it to an I did list. So then you start acknowledging the things that you've done, because often we've done a lot of things through our day, even if they're small things like getting up and taking a shower and brushing our teeth and maybe running an errand or taking our dog out for a walk, etc. It's all different based on our situations, but we often do things and we don't give ourselves credit for it, and sometimes we need to see that. Julie says every month she has a manicure and pedicure, and that's nice. Maddie says, gotta say it again, but try putting your bare feet on the ground. He is a big fan of grounding. Warren and Jane said, I've heard of a don't do list. I kind of like that list. If you want to explain it a little bit more, I'd love to I'd love to learn a little bit more. Pam says, nice long shower or maybe a good hair treatment to pamper myself, or getting something small but inexpensive, such as like a nice lotion or moisturizer or dessert, or playing with pets, like small things. And then Lisa says, I feel accomplished to do only a couple things from her list, like 3 out of 5 sometimes. And then Maria says going to she goes to a support group with NMSS, and that, and she helps to, she facilitates, sorry, I had to read that. Wish you guys could see, this is a very hard screen sometimes. So going to the support group and helping to facilitate that gives her joy. So finding those things, finding and making time, self-care definitely doesn't happen spontaneously. Sometimes it can kind of, jump on our into our laps, but often we have to make space for it. And so finding small little things, and this call is more than anything for you to feel inspired to think, what are some small things that I can do to take care of myself, and hopefully build from that. So let's go to our next chat box. What gets in the way of self-care? Let's talk about it. I know for me, my schedule and my energy sometimes. And then it looks like I'm going right into sleeping, which is self-care, but not kind of what I want. So, so what gets in the way of self-care? I know sometimes you might have dedicated time to do something and your telephone rings and it distracts you. Or we have Deborah says depression. Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes we can get in the way of our own self-care. Our moods can, et cetera, because symptoms like apathy or depression kind of tell us, no, I don't need to do that. Why bother? Or that won't be fun, or I'd rather stay here in bed. So absolutely. And then Rhonda says getting distracted. And then Helen said, yes, when I get too sleepy and depression, so she could understand that. Warren and Jane shared, so the don't do list, things really that don't have to be done, like washing a window or looking over your list and think, what would happen if this doesn't get done? I love this. So Warren and Jane, you guys are teaching me today another strategy when I talk about lists. I'll talk about the don't do list, the I did list, and the to do list. So thank you. Lisa said phone calls, things, let's see. I have to read the, okay, phone calls, things breaking, nothing working right, or forgetting what I'm doing second to second. So, so small things can get in the way of self-care. Like if you're trying to do something and then something's not working right, and then you're distracted or you're frustrated, etc. Perfect. We're going to move on to our next slide. So when you think about the things that get in the way of self-care, it's important to think about how can I work around that? What are strategies that I can do to help work around that? So if for me, like if I bank that my self-care activities are going to be in the afternoon, late afternoon and evening, forget it. I'm too tired at the end of the day. So I have to really work my self-care in a little bit earlier during the day. For someone that's getting distracted, sometimes if I turning off electronics, doing things to help minimize distraction is good. Another thing is to set reminders on your phone. That sometimes can help you too to, in 5 minutes, if I'm not, doing what I said I was going to be doing, my alarm will go off and will tell me. So we have Pam, this is lack of energy, too much on my mind that distracts, or just too much other stuff going on. This is from Warren and Jane, and it's such a smart thing. Scammers that call on the telephone, we found that the cell phone often now will tell us it's possibly a scam, so they don't answer those calls. Yeah, because they're mostly, that's the case. Maria says, ask yourself this, is this that I'm stressing about make a difference in 10 years? It's a great thought. So we're going to move on to our next slide. And we are going to talk about when to consider seeing a MS counselor in your journey. I haven't brought this up in a while, but I just think it's good to bring up. So if you can see the lady in the blue sweater has a lot going on in her head. And the therapist actually is able to separate it and see it differently. If you are feeling overwhelmed, seeing a counselor is not a bad idea. If you are dealing with depression or apathy, anxiety, mood changes, seeing a counselor is not a bad idea. If you just need someone to talk to and to talk through things, seeing a counselor is not a bad idea. I just wanted to encourage you and to know that a counselor definitely can be a part of your MS mental, your wellness care team. When we talk about that multidisciplinary team, a counselor might be someone who comes off and on. I know for myself and my own MS journey, I am a therapist, but I've seen a counselor as well in my own MS journey. So I like to encourage you that if you have a lot going on and you feel overwhelmed and you're trying self-care, you're trying stress management, and it just isn't helping as much as you feel like it should, then I am going to encourage you to talk to your primary care doctor or talk to your MS specialist, probably any provider, and find out if there's any therapists in your area. You don't have to necessarily have a therapist that specializes in MS. I always say therapists that have a disease and chronic disease actually are going to be as good, because they're going to understand a lot of the themes that people experience with when they're living with MS. So if you don't know me yet, this is the last slide I have for these programs, and it says not goodbye, but see you later. And the truth is that I look forward to seeing you next month at the Mental Wellness Chat. This is a great program. You guys have been amazing at contributing today and helping one another out. And I hope that you take something with you and feel encouraged about self-care and taming stress. And until next time, I'll see you later.